My dear brothers and sisters, I'm sure when we scroll on our computers or read our newspapers, you may see a lot of surveys. For example, I'm talking of indexes comparing to countries or places. And what index I'm talking about? Say, index of which countries are the richest and the poorest, countries which are literate, or a very popular index, that is the happiness index. How happy are persons from country to country, and then you will have a survey. I'm sure there will be also an index maybe for ourselves as to how happy we are amongst ourselves. What is our level, say from the scale of 1 to 10. But today, we have an index which is so special for each one of us. We have come here in this Eucharistic celebration, and the index I'm talking about is that of grace. But then the question arises, does grace have an index? How many graces did you receive? Did you receive this year much more as compared to last year? What is it? For God, He gives us graces immense and beyond measure. You cannot count them. And therefore, the only index we can see here is God's hand is in this. That we are bestowed with immense grace. I'm sure we have come here for these days of the Novena through the honor of our brother Saint Francis Xavier and through his intercession, that grace has been continuously been with us. God's love and grace, it was so dear for Ignatius of Loyola and Francis Xavier that if they had this too, it was sufficient for them. They are happy. And I think today, and in great feeling, that a feeling of joy and feeling being loved is something that we can take home in terms of our grace, in terms of the grace. One thing we should also remember, this feast day is because of Marcello Mastrelli, in that sense when he experienced a death kind of a situation when a hammer fell on his head. It was in 1633, and a workman was doing up a kind of a painting in Naples, and it fell on his head and he was about to die. But on the 10th day, Francis Xavier appeared to him and said, "You will be healed," which comes to our original reading for today, the gospel reading. And this man who was there for 38 years waiting for someone to put him in the pool when it is stirred, when it is troubled, is how the reading would say. But Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be healed?" Today the question, He's knocking at your door and at my door, is, do you want grace? Our brother Francis Xavier has unceasingly, ever since his death and canonization, has been praying for us, interceding for us. Today he's knocking on our behalf and is asking you and me, do you want that grace? Do you want grace? Do you want to feel loved and accompanied by God? And I feel this is so important in terms of grace, is how we build on leadership as a theme. And when we are saying we are empowering someone, especially the laity, how do we empower this leadership? If you know, if you're talking about it, when you see on your sports channel, especially during the Olympics, this year we have the Olympics in Paris, when you see the 4 into maybe 100 meters or 400 meters, you will always see the person running with a baton. And the baton is always passed. Lay leadership is precisely as God is passing the baton through us, maybe priests and religious, and now giving to the laity, which means to say God's grace continues. God's work continues here on earth through all of us. And special emphasis on you, especially the laity. And what does this mean? That everything is situated on God's love. If you see Jesus' conversation with this man who wanted to be healed, and then eventually experiences healing, he is of great joy. He didn't tell out of curiosity to the Jews to say that Jesus healed him. He told them out of great joy. So leadership is what the joy we have received, the love that we have received. And so what does it mean? What does it entail in terms of leadership? It means one has to stand in sincerity, integrity, honesty, and no fear, which means to lead from the front. And why do we emphasize on lay leadership? Because today is so important that we are all called to speak up. The kind of culture of silence that has come in is so mind-blowing in that sense that we do not know what to do next. And so therefore we have to go the opposite direction to speak up with truth which will bring in reconciliation and healing. And I think this is important if you are talking in terms of grace. Our fruits of our grace will be seen through our actions. And I think as priests and religious, I think it is our responsibility to back our laity. It is to accompany them, to pray for them, to bless them, and to instill confidence. Today, as we end this day on a high note, on the culmination of God's grace given through our brother, Saint Francis Xavier, to each one of us, what are we going to pray for ourselves, for our families? I'm sure you will have something in your mind. Maybe you're asking God's grace on a particular situation or a particular favor that you are seeking from God through Francis Xavier. But the whole idea of grace is to show that God is with you and with me throughout. That is grace. What are we to do is to choose to remain in grace. That is important. So if we are talking of effective lay leadership and empowering, this is what we have to do. Even as priests as we are called to remain in grace. It is a challenge, but do not worry. God is the one who provides. So Jesus is going to knock at your door and my door through Francis Xavier, through his grace. And he says, do you want that grace? Amen.